Hey guys, I just wanted to make a video about synchronicities. I've always been kind of fascinated with coincidences. Now I call them synchronicities, and it seemed like I was always observing them and noticing them ever since I was a little kid. Um, there's two like big things I want to talk about, and so I noticed this is a very like odd set of synchronicities that I kind of noticed as a kid, um, that I just thought was kind of weird. So, my dad, he had his best friend. His name, I'm not even going to say names. His nickname was Cracker. My dad, redhead, blue eyes, wild redhead, crazy redhead. My grandma's red hair too. She's she was wild too. She was always scrapping. Um, anyways, so he had his best friend in high school was also another, skinny redhead guy just like him, and they were both very wild. Just crazy, rolling cars, jumping trucks, and just one time my dad went out at lunch, rolled his truck, smashed the window all in, hauled ass back to high school and parked. Um, you know, and just parked. He got out like nothing happened, and apparently everyone started surrounding him, like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And he's like broke his arm from that before, and they were just very wild. They've run from cops together, fight together, drink together, just very wild guys. Um, anyways, so this guy he was very close to my dad. They were almost like twins. Um, they were definitely best friends. But what happened was, when my dad was very young, and this guy I think was maybe a year older than him, he ended up passing away in a car on train tracks. I don't know if everyone knows exactly what happened, but I believe there was someone else driving. I don't think he was driving. This guy, he was like my dad. He was very wild, but they're very intelligent too. So I don't know exactly what happened, but he wasn't driving, and I think there may have been some alcohol involved. And they basically got hit by a train in a car, I believe is what happened. And so at such a young age, my dad had lost his best friend. And then I found out later as a kid, and this guy was only like 18 when he died, or something like that, 19. He was very young. And then I found out later that my mom actually lost a little brother. I didn't even know about him until I was like older, maybe like 10. My mom had lost someone very close to her. My dad lost someone that was like his brother. My mom did lose a brother when she was very young, and he was very young. Her brother was like 16 years old, and I believe they were having fun drinking, and he was hanging out of a sunroof. And they turned a corner too sharp, and he came out of the sunroof, hit his head, and died. And I believe this took place. They live in South Florida, so that was another thing. I'm pretty sure they were living there when this happened too. Kind of weird, on opposite sides, complete opposites of the United States. You got Southern California in the far southwest corner, and then you got South Florida on the East Coast, all the way on the east side in the southern corner. Like complete like opposites, but still very similar. That's kind of where some of her family ended up living too, which is kind of interesting. But he was also very young and died from, a car was involved, and I believe alcohol was involved, and he was very young too. And I always just thought that, man, that's kind of a weird coincidence. They both lost someone when they were very young, and the people they lost were like teenagers. They were very young, and there was like alcohol and a car involved. I just thought that was a little bit weird. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but I just always thought that was kind of weird. I remember when I first found out about like that I had another uncle that died that I never met, and I never got to meet my uncle. And I don't believe I ever met my dad's best friend either, that would have been like my uncle. Kind of weird, but I remember my mom started like talking about him. I was like, you had another brother? Like, we would have had an uncle? And she said, yeah, he passed away. Like I said, I believe it was in Florida. And I remember she was very young too. She pulls out like these, like a picture and like a newspaper clipping or something like that, and she just starts reading about it, and they're saying what happened. I remember she just started crying, and I just remember, like, I was just like kind of in shock. I really felt, for my mom, that she was crying, and I was just like, Jesus, she lost like a little brother. I didn't even know about it. So I thought that was just a kind of a weird coincidence, but there's something else. This also happened when they were like teenagers, when they were very young. My other uncle, and my grandmother actually got in a bad car accident. Where I had my spiritual awakening on the Banning Bench in the San Gorgonio Mountains, there's a big hill that you got to drive up to get there, and it's a very windy road. You got to be very careful. So my uncle went up to the house, and my grandmother was supposed to meet my uncle's friend, and she wasn't there yet. She was on her way. They didn't want to wait, and my uncle told me this guy was a crazy driver. I didn't even want to get in the car with him. I told him, hey, I think my uncle actually told him, hey, if you wreck, something happens, I'm gonna, kick your ass. Because it was like that wild of a driver. But he was my uncle's friend. He was probably just joking with him. So they get in the car, and this guy's, it's a little truck. There's 3 in the front. It fits 3, seats 3, and he's driving crazy down this windy mountain road. They're teenagers. My grandma's coming up the road in a van. They come around the corner. They're on the wrong side of the road. Square. They hit each other just square. Basically, there's 4 people involved. 2 of them die on impact. I mean, it was an insane accident. They just slammed into each other. I don't know how fast they were going. I believe the motor went through the dashboard, and what's crazy is, so 2 died on impact, 2 survived, which happened to be my 2 family members. But when they were supposed to have died on impact, like the other 2, everyone was supposed to die like that. And even the paramedics and everyone that got there were like, Jesus, how are these 2 people still alive? Even when they got them to the hospital, they were saying that. The doctors and nurses, like, they've lost so much blood. Like, how are they even alive? I believe both of them were actually lost at the hospital multiple times too. So I know they think about that, but I thought about that a lot as a kid. Like, why did they survive? How were they able to survive when all 4 of them were supposed to die on impact? Not just 2, all 4. And the 2 that survived in opposite vehicles too. My grandmother was by herself, and then those 3. How did they survive? I don't know. And when everyone's saying, oh my God, like, how are they still alive? I mean, her huge, every bone in their body broken. They're both in a wheelchair. My uncle's still in a wheelchair. My grandma has a lot of major issues, but she's very tough. She actually the doctor told her, you will never walk in your life. And she forced herself to started crawling, eventually started walking, but it's still difficult for her to walk. She has a lot of flare-ups. She doesn't like the cold. But I mean, that serious of an accident, huge flaps of their skin from their skull flapped over. I mean, she grabbed a flap and pulled it back and is trying to wipe blood out of her eyes. Her legs are pinned in, the motor's pinning her legs, feet completely smashed. I mean, guys, they were supposed to die. They did die, at the hospital. I believe both of them, they had to bring them back I think one of them was multiple times too. And like I said, they were supposed to both be in wheelchairs the rest of their lives. I just wonder, why did they survive? Like, how did they survive? They were supposed to die. And then I started, like, when I found out, like, who I was, that I was an earth angel, I started thinking about these things, like, Jesus, like, back then, our family, like I said, my parents had children very, very young. My mom was 15 when she got pregnant. My dad was like 16. Our family was very kind of new, fragile. They were very young. My mom had like depression issues. She was like sick all the time. She had like a disease she didn't know about. My dad, he didn't have an easy childhood either. He had very, very bad temper. I was just thinking, how would my family have even survived if those two people also, like, because it happened all around the same time. Like, like, we moved out, my grandma was the one that actually helped my dad get the house in Joshua Tree, and why we moved out to Joshua Tree, which is a very spiritual place. And she's the one that has the house where I used to go to. I love nature, where I used to go to as a kid. Remember, I lived in Joshua Tree. There's not that much wildlife, and some people might say in Southern California there's not a ton either, but it was a decent amount, a lot more than what I was used to seeing. And that's the house I had my spiritual awakening, in those mountains, in that house. And she just had a big influence in our life and my life, and my uncles also had a pretty big influence in my life too. And just thinking, like what would have happened to us if they not just each lost basically a brother at such a young age, but what if my dad also lost his best friend? What if he also lost, at the same time almost, his only brother, his older brother, and his mother too? Guys, I don't know if my family would have survived. My grandmother also was the one that she would like take us. Like, my mom would be kind of stressed out. Oh, can you take the baby, or can you take the kids? When they would get in fights, remember, my dad loved my mom very, very much, but everyone fights, no one's perfect, and he had a very bad temper, and sometimes they'd get in really bad fights, and my mom would either call my grandmother or load us in the car, and we'd all drive an hour to Beaumont and stay up there for just a little while. And she'd go to my grandma to talk about, my dad and his temper, and my grandma would say, yeah, stick up for yourself, and don't let him do that, you tell him this. And I just think, like, and like I said, that's where I had my spiritual awakening, in her house, in those mountains. She's the one where we moved to Joshua Tree, spiritual place. She lives in a spiritual place, the San Gorgonio Mountains. My uncles had a big impact in my life. Like, just think, Jesus, what would have happened if they would have passed away like they were supposed to? I don't know if my new fragile family would have even made it. I mean, guys, things were pretty fragile at that time. And then it's just crazy to think about. This is supposed to be my destiny as an earth angel, and it would have changed the trajectory of a lot of things. So I don't know. Why? Just a coincidence? Why were they saved when they were supposed to die, those two? It just makes you, and I know, guys, it's crazy to think about, or to even say. When you start saying things like that, it's kind of weird, because it's like, what are you saying, that you're more important, or they're more important than these other two guys that died? Like, I'm not saying that, but it's just so strange. When I started to think about it yesterday, and I'm like, Jesus, they already had those two losses, familiar losses that were weird coincidence. What if they also had these other two losses, like, right in a row? I don't know, guys. I don't know. And then I would have never even had my cousins that we were kind of close to. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, guys. I had my spiritual awakening there at that house in the mountains, at that place, that spiritual place. We lived in, I grew up in Joshua Tree because of her, at that spiritual place. It's just, when you start to think about things like that, it's just very, very crazy. That would have changed everything, and would have changed my whole life as an earth angel if they would have died like they were supposed to die that day. So I know it's a lot, it's crazy, and it's a lot to think about, guys, but it's just, you start thinking about things like that, like if they would have died like they were supposed to, I don't even know, I don't even want to think about what would have happened. My trajectory as an earth angel, I don't even know if it would have ended up being fulfilled. I don't know. It's just crazy to think about, but I'll wrap this video up right here. I just wanted to tell that story about those synchronicities that I noticed when I was a kid, and I just wanted to tell that other story too about, you know, what would have, I was thinking about that yesterday, what would have happened if they would have died like they were basically supposed to die. So I'll wrap this video up right here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support. Subscribe to my channel, Earth Angel Army Awakening, and thank you so much.